So why don't we start? I'd like to welcome everyone. This is our monthly NEST Building and Development meeting. This a bunch of new names I'm seeing, new faces. So I'm happy to see everybody joining us. Tonight we're going to continue exploring these upcoming Illinois stretch energy codes. We opened this meeting up to the broader NEST community, and we even invited city staff so that we can all gain this comprehensive understanding of what the code's implications will be and its role in helping Naperville achieve its sustainability goals. So I thought I'd just remind everyone that about NEST's Sustainable Naperville 2036 report. In that report, we aimed for a 60% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions by 2035. And buildings were a major contributor, 76%, right? So the stretch energy code could be a very effective tool in helping us achieve the reduction we need by requiring increased building energy efficiency in new construction. So tonight, we do have a speaker change, but we're really fortunate to have Allison Lindberg. She's the Director of Building Codes and Policy at the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, MIA, and Jeanette Lesacks from Slipstream to help lead tonight's discussion. They're both experts on the topic, and we're really pleased to welcome them. Last month, the team here began this educational series with Isaac Elnikov from FIAS, who presented on the residential aspect of the stretch code. So I just thought before we started tonight's presentation, I don't know if Gonzalo or anybody else who participated last month has any comments or questions left over from that discussion. That's fine. Oh, Gonzalo, do you have a comment, something?
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. It was a good meeting last month. I didn't know much about the Illinois stretch code, so it was very delightful, and it's great that we're having this follow-up meeting.
Oh, thanks. Great. So I think that's probably it. I'll hand it over to Allison, and she can start the discussion and give her presentation. And if anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to write in the chat, and we'll leave time at the end. Right, Allison?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, to let the conversation go. And Allison, you'll be able to share your screen if you have any slides. It shouldn't be a problem.
I do. Give me just a second and bear with me. You know, when you have to start a PowerPoint presentation and then share, it just doesn't always go seamlessly. So just give me a quick second to do that. And okay, there's the PowerPoint. And then once I get there, then I can actually go to the slideshow. Oops, sorry about that. Now let's see. There we go. Okay, can you all see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for bearing with me. And thank you so much for having me. I don't know if there are actually any city staff here that joined us today, but if not, hopefully they'll get a chance to review this at a later date. Just for a little bit of background, we have met with the city staff before, talking to them very briefly about this. I think that was maybe back in July, we were thinking, so it's been a while. But very happy to be here. And as was mentioned, my name is Allison Lindberg, and I'm with the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. And I'm gonna go through some stuff on this little agenda that we have, just talking introduction to stretch codes, why they're important, go briefly over some high-level technical details. I know that you all just had an overview of this, but I was still asked to kind of give it again because this was open to the wider community. That being said, we have a lot more technical details than what I'm going to be sharing today. So if you are ever looking for a deeper dive than this, we have that available. And then we'll go into some of the next steps and would like to get a little bit of an understanding of what is happening with you all and how we can potentially help. So that being said, let me just tell you a little bit about MIA. So Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance is a nonprofit organization. We're called a Regional Energy Efficiency Organization, or a RIO. There are 6 RIOs in the United States that represent the entire country, and we represent the Midwest. For energy codes and building performance standards and things like that, we are 13 states plus 14. We also have Alaska. So that's where our work is. My work focuses on energy codes and benchmarking and building performance standards. I saw Chris Murphy, I believe, had put something in the chat about existing buildings. We work on existing buildings as well as energy codes and stretch codes. And actually, this project also works on building performance standards. And so we can talk a little bit about that as well, so that we can get to existing buildings. That being said, we're a member organization, which means that we have a number of members that also provide insight to us, help us with workforce development, and things like that. And so they can include everything from utilities to state and local governments, academic and research institutions, and then a lot of different people in the energy efficiency industry, including manufacturers and implementers of programs and things like that. Um, Also, what was mentioned was that Jeanette Lizax from Slipstream is here. And then I also just wanted to mention that Cheryl Scott from the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus is also actually here today. So I'm going to let Jeanette introduce herself in Slipstream, and then Cheryl can talk about the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and then we'll get into the meat of everything, if that sounds okay. Jeanette?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Hope everyone's having a good night. So I'm Jeanette. I am one of our directors of research and innovation at Slipstream. For those that may not be familiar with Slipstream, we are another nonprofit working closely with MIA. We have a mission to accelerate climate solutions for everyone, and we do that in several different ways. We have our research division, which I'm a part of, where we do everything from understanding particular decarbonization or energy efficiency technologies, how they function in a building. We research that, do on the ground research, all the way to like energy planning, policies such as stretch code, building performance standards, and kind of everything in between there. We also have an education and training arm, largely targeted towards building professionals. We also have a program implementation arm. We run several programs in the ComEd area, Northern Chicago area, or Northern Illinois area. And we also have a financing arm, where we help folks do investments around their energy efficiency technologies and buildings. So for this project, I'm very excited to be here tonight, and look forward to the discussion. I'll let maybe Cheryl introduce herself.
Thanks, Jeanette. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm Cheryl Scott. I'm the Sustainability Specialist for the Mayor's Caucus, and we're a membership organization of the 275 municipalities in the 7-county Chicago area. And we help municipalities with environmental initiatives, housing, a few other areas. And we've been working with Slipstream and MIA on this project so that we can provide more assistance to municipalities to think about and develop and adopt the stretch codes and building performance standards. And I'm stopping in, but we are on deadline for the Priority Climate Action Plan, so I'm not sure that I can stay the whole time. Thank you.
Great. I'm so glad you were able to make it, Cheryl. And good luck with that. Lots of deadlines happening right now, I feel like. And I'm also glad that Jeanette is here and she's going to be jumping in it anytime she feels like it tonight in case I forget something or she has got a point to make or something.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So as was mentioned by the three of us, we are working on a project together to help municipalities adopt and implement advanced building policies. So today we are talking about the stretch code because that's what was asked. But as I already mentioned, we're also working on this for building performance standards in the same location. So if we want to have a conversation about that today, or we want to set that to a later time because we don't have enough time tonight, like we are very open to that. So just want to throw that out there. So what we're doing is we are engaging with municipalities, trying to help them understand how they can adopt, and we'll just talk about stretch codes right now, how they can adopt stretch codes. Like you mentioned, what are some of the pain points for both adoption and implementation? What kind of resources can we provide you all to assist with that? And then also looking at the support programs to implement stretch codes. So we'll get into this just a little bit later, but one of the things we are looking at in the future is how can this overlay with like existing utility programs or even some of the federal funding or maybe state funding that is available. And then the last thing that you'll see on here is about savings and attribution. That's just because the utilities are interested in claiming savings for this program. They're doing it through a market transformation framework. And so you're probably wondering, you see utilities and you see ComEd on there, and you're probably thinking, but Naperville has its own utility. ComEd is still interested in helping because ComEd wants stretch codes to be adopted across the state of Illinois. And they understand that the more municipalities that adopt this, the easier it's going to be to get adoption, across the state. Essentially, nobody really wants to be the first person to do it, right? So, and we have a number of municipalities that are already interested. So don't worry, Naperville will never be the first. But anyway, so ComEd is interested. They want us to be here and to provide information to you all today, and so that's what we're going to do. Okay, so I'm going to give an introduction on stretch codes. I just want to say again that you probably have seen some of this already. Before I begin, I wanted to let you know that I'm on the Illinois Energy Code Advisory Council that has helped the state create the language for the stretch code. So it's currently under development right now, and I can tell you a little bit more about that. But so I'm pretty close to it. I know the language fairly well. So essentially, if you don't know what a stretch code is, it's an optional compliance path that defines a higher level of energy efficiency than what a state base code is. So Illinois has had a state code for a number of years. They make it get better every 3 years when the national model codes get better. But municipalities, in most cases, especially on the residential side, don't have the opportunity to adopt something that's stronger. And so that's where a stretch code comes in. And it essentially gives an alternative compliance path, usually has to be adopted by a municipality, and then it becomes the floor. So the energy code right now is, for lack of a better way of saying it, the worst building by law that can be built in terms of energy efficiency. And then when you have a stretch code, it's a requirement that's a little higher. But once it becomes adopted by that municipality, it then becomes that floor. And then what it does is it helps to gain market acceptance of adoption for stronger codes in the future, because that stretch code, elements of it will become the next base code. That's why it's called a stretch. It can provide significant cost savings for residences and businesses because the best time to make buildings energy efficient is in new construction. It's the most cost-effective way to do it. And it also gives municipalities a tool to make the decisions on how they want their building stock to be for the future. So they don't just have to rely on what comes out of the state-based energy code. They can have this additional option to make their building stock required to be a little bit better. So the reason and the opportunity that came about here is that the state legislature and then the governor signed into law what we call CEJA, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, and it essentially directed the Capital Development Board to develop a stretch code for municipalities to adopt. And it sets specific site energy index performance targets for conservation. So no matter what else is in the stretch code, it has to be a certain level of efficiency by law. And then the targets increase in stringency every 3 years. They get more stringent and essentially gets us to net zero energy by 2032. And that's just using conservation targets. So I should say, sorry, it's net zero energy ready by 2032. So right now it doesn't have any solar requirements in it, but if somebody were to add solar or other renewables to it, then you could consider it to be net zero. But this is just in conservation. It gets us towards net zero energy ready. And then, as I mentioned before, once it's formally adopted by a municipality, then it takes over being the base requirement and it becomes the requirement for that municipality. And it's for new construction, additions, and major renovations. So anything that the energy code applies to right now is what the stretch code will apply to in the future. So, excuse me, some things that were asked for us were benefits of stretch codes, and we thought it might be fun to actually take a poll for you all. Excuse me. If you like, you can use your phones to take a picture of this, but we thought this might help with the discussion as we're going forward. So you can take your phone, take a picture of the QR code, or you can go to menti.com and you'll enter in that passcode number. And then give me a second because I'm going to put this in the chat so that you guys can click on it. And then I'm actually going to open up the Mentimeter. So give me a quick second. Thank you for bearing with me. Okay, we'll go to the chat. I promise this will actually be fun once it finally happens. Okay. There we go. That's in the chat. And I hope you guys can get to that. All right, I'm going to stop sharing so I can open the Mentimeter. Thank you very much. Okay. Right now, if you're doing it, you'll probably see that it hasn't been started yet. So we're just going to get it started. Here we go. All right. And now, yay! I've already got some responses here. Okay, I'm going to share screen. Like I said, it's never seamless as you want it to be. Okay. So hopefully you can all see that. I wanted to get it to do presentation mode, but it's not letting me. So essentially, we thought that we would ask you, what do you think the biggest barriers are to stretch code adoption in Naperville? So we see city staff, stakeholder buy-in, staff, developers influence over staff, developers are likely to be opposed and have a strong influence in city government, commitment from the city government. Sure, I can understand this. And I'll just say that this is not 100% new to Naperville. I feel like anytime there's a new ordinance or requirement, there's opposition from developers or at least concerns from developers, and the same thing with city staff. So yeah, this is good feedback, and we can talk about this a little bit more too.
I'm kind of curious if I know
Mhm.
Mentimeter is nice because it is anonymous, but if anyone wants to elaborate on any of these pieces, I'm particularly curious about the barrier of maybe city staff, like what, if there's any particular pieces of that. And if folks don't want to chime in, that's okay.
Hi, this is Chris. I worked for the city of Naperville for 3.5 years, and I did do some development review. I was in the water department, but staff in general, management they would bend over backwards for developers. And staff, quite frequently was told, get this done early, overlook that. Don't, like if we had comments outstanding, they were like, oh, does that really matter even though it's in the ordinance kind of thing? So they are very, very focused on keeping developers happy and not necessarily doing what's best, I think, for the general environment or the general city going forward. And, we kind of see that where we have problems later on that we're dealing with, sometimes with aging infrastructure and such, but just lessons learned type of thing where it's just like, oh, we could have built that better, but the developer didn't want to or something. Or, I mean, I had some projects where they were trying to squeeze things in and we're just like, it just doesn't fit. And they were coming back and, can't you make it work? And we're like, no, we can't. So that was my take from working there and being there. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer that.
I think that's really helpful to get an understanding of, so I appreciate that. Thanks, Chris. Anyone else?
I think I was just going to mention that my impression from meetings with people on the staff, they have their cadence for how they work on adopting the building, updating their building code, and all the work that entails for staff. And anticipating that they may be concerned that this is just going to be another layer, another hurdle that staff is going to have to deal with. I don't know if somebody from the city would like to respond to that, but I know that maybe they feel limited by that. And I think what we're trying to do with this education is to show how this benefits the city. And this should be seen as something as to be helpful and not to be a hindrance or another obstacle. But I think that can factor into some of the hesitancy.
So Barbara, I want to get clarification if you don't mind. Is it the apologies, the adoption that's the extra work for the city staff? I know like looking through those ordinances and figuring out the language that can take a long time. Or is it the implementation that you think the city staff is concerned with? Or do you think it's both?
I think it's both.
Okay.
Because I know they're in the process of adopting a new building code, right? They do it every 3 years, 4 years. I can't remember exactly. And that's a whole big process for them, learning it, training the inspectors and all of that. So now if we were to come and say, okay, now here's something else on top of that, and it doesn't fit in with their timeline, like they've just gone through the whole thing of learning the IECC building code, right? That code.
Right. Mm-hmm.
This is going to be something else, and they may be reluctant to embrace that. But
sure,
I may be wrong, but so.
Hey, Barbara, we've been kind of hearing the same thing, the same kind of feedback when talking to Aurora. They just got some new staff, so we're hoping this conversation goes a little more smoothly in the future. But, having spent 25 years in engineering, from reviewing to writing ordinances myself to designing, all that kind of stuff. I mean, everything is constantly changing. And sometimes we get these really big changes. We get big state or federal things pushed down on us. It's just kind of how it goes. I mean, we always are adapting. We're always having to keep learning and changing. We don't do things the way we did them back, like even designing when I started 25 years ago. So it's just how it is, I think. And, maybe there's a staff capacity issue where they either need to consult some of the work out or they need to hire more staff. And I think that, that for me is a discussion point. Like, let's talk about that. If this is generating too much work, then let's get let's get more help in there to help do that. So that's some thoughts I have on that.
I just
go
like to
ahead.
add that, the decision about this though does not come from city staff. It comes from city council. And so I think that we have work to do, like Barbara was saying, in convincing them that this is good for Naperville. And, ultimately staff has to do what city council passes, right? So whether they want to or not, but staff also has a lot of influence on city council. Our city council respects city staff, and their expertise and their opinions too. So I think that, just helping everyone understand, at all levels, all the stakeholders, what the benefit is to our Naperville residents, I think is what we need to do. And I think, in some cases we do have a little bit of an uphill battle with some of our city council members, because that's really the crux of getting this done.
Do you think there's one city council member that supports it, or do you think they're all against it? Because if you don't have anyone, then this is really going to be an uphill battle, probably.
I'm going to hop in here if I may.
Sure.
I live right behind one of the city council members, Allison Loggenbaugh. And she is very environmentally aware. She actually has a daughter who's doing environmental studies in Seattle right now in college. So I would say if you want to approach anyone, Allison is the woman. I feed her books. Like right now she's reading Jeff Speck's Walkable City, and that I gave to her.
She loves that book.
Yes, it's amazing. It's eye-opening. And so she's buying more copies for other city council members. So I would say she is the woman to approach. She's very politically savvy, very down to earth.
Great. Well, this is a great discussion. I don't want to take away from it. So if anyone else has anything else to say, I think we can also get into some of the next steps after we, go through the overview again. But does anyone have anything else to add about some barriers? Then we're going to just brainstorm really briefly, maybe some opportunities.
Yeah, I have one quick thing, and I will say this is an issue at another place, but what's happening is staff isn't doing the work that they've been directed to do by city council, and then they're actually lying and saying they did it, and when we ask for it, they can't show anything, and they're backtracking and circling around. And I just think that everybody needs to get on the same page and just get things done. We're at a place of transition, not only for the environment, but for technology. A lot of this new technology is here to make our lives better. And I think we've been through it before with other kinds of technology like computers and cars and other things in our lives. And we just need to view it as positive change, even though it's going to be a lot of work. So just want to say that we've had similar conversations elsewhere.
Yeah, Chris, good point. And I saw Aaron is the one that spoke up about the council member. So thank you, Aaron. I didn't get a chance to directly thank you on that. And then Sustain Naperville, I see that as your name. I'm not sure. I heard your name
Oh,
is
I'm sorry.
Kathy. Is it Kathy?
Yeah, I'll rename myself. Sorry. I'm Kathy Clark and I'm the chair of Nest.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, good. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for this so far. Let's move on to the next, just like quick little question that we have for you all, which is, what are the opportunities and benefits to stretch code adoption? Now, we're going to feed you some helpful ones too, but I would like to know what you think would be the most compelling, or if you have any ideas of your own. And, feel free to say whatever. There's no wrong, no right answers. And maybe nobody thinks there are any. I'm just teasing. It can take a while for it to show up on the Menti. Great. Save consumers money and reduce carbon emissions. Agreed. Building better stock, more competitive in the market. Agreed. Love that. Future-ready homes and businesses that won't require retrofits to meet climate and efficiency goals. Savings for home and building owners. Agreed. I'll just give like one more minute. But yes, and we can talk about this too in the discussion, but there are things that I know you know this already, but there are things that we know are good about stretch codes, but then there are things that in order to actually move a stretch code, people need to feel comfortable with, and they need to know benefits in a different way. And so that is part of what we've been trying to do. You've already named like some of the potential, I don't want to say pain points, because the concerns are valid in the sense that if I was a developer, I would be concerned just because it's my business. If I was city staff, I would be concerned because it's my workload. And we've been working on resources to try to help. So hopefully after today, we can tell you guys what we're doing and you guys can feel a little bit more comfortable, and we can also help answer some of the questions that you're probably going to get. So that being said, I'm going to do one more not seamless screen share stop, go back to the presentation. Again, thank you so much for bearing with me on this. And screen share. Here we go. And going from current slide. Okay, great. So we did this, and now we're here. So as you mentioned, yes, overall, these stretch codes, building policies like BPS, they play a vital role in reducing emissions, both existing and new buildings. Specifically for stretch codes, the decision made at that point of new construction has that lasting, lifelong impact. So we know that that's why these are important. Naperville and Nest knows this too. I've seen it in your sustainability plans. I saw it in the 2036 plan. I saw the Naperville sustainability work plan specifically called out the Naperville building code to incrementally achieve net zero or greater or sooner by, I think it was 2030. Yeah, or sooner. So it seems like Naperville knows this, but I can still understand that they may have, they may be dragging their feet a little bit in actually making it happen. So let's just talk a little bit about like some of the actual savings benefits to get this in your mind. So the very first iteration of the stretch code, because it's going to continue to get better every 3 years, is going to have on the residential side. So before the state adopted the 2021 IECC, it was going to be a 24% improvement on residential energy savings, and that's single family and low rise multifamily, and then a 4.7% on commercial. And again, that's just based on what CEJA was requiring. But by 2032, that number will be 55% better for residential and 31% better for commercial. So that's significant. That means that there's going to be a lot of cost savings for utility bills for building owners and residents, and also just occupants of buildings if you're like a commercial building renter, and then reduce carbon emissions and then better air quality as well. So I'm going to go into some of the details around the energy codes, and apologies if this is, repeat for you. But prior to CEJA, municipalities, unless you had certain exemptions because you were home rule and you had an energy code that was adopted prior to 2009, or I think 2006, that was equivalent to the 2009 IECC, you're over 1 million in population, you could not adopt a residential code that was stronger than the state energy code. And nobody is allowed to do one that's weaker than the state energy code. So anytime the state energy code gets updated, which is typically on a 3-year cycle, every municipality is supposed to update to that as well. On the commercial side, it's a little bit different. For commercial buildings, municipalities could always adopt something as the floor that was stronger than the state energy code. Even though that has been an option, no municipality has done that besides Chicago. And even Chicago was doing it on just a little bit of a more efficient scale. It wasn't anything drastic. Now with this stretch code, so after CEJA, when it becomes available, which it's supposed to be available after June 30th of this year, municipalities will have the option of either adopting the state base code or the state stretch code for residential, or I should say, and they have the option for state base code and state stretch code for commercial. They will also have the option to do something stronger than the state base code and do their own stretch energy code on the commercial side. One of the benefits to having the stretch code and having these two options is it means you don't have municipalities having a bunch of different energy codes. And so part of the work that we're doing is we're trying to educate municipalities specifically about the state developed stretch codes, because we don't want municipalities to be doing a lot of different adoptions, and then that confuses developers and it confuses builders. And if you have people working across multiple jurisdictions at the inspector level, it's also really confusing. So essentially there will be 2 options for municipalities to choose from. And if you adopt the state stretch code for residential, for example, you don't have to adopt the state stretch code for commercial. You could adopt the state base code instead. So, there's multiple choices on here, but whatever you choose, that becomes the floor, that becomes the bare minimum in that jurisdiction. And then this is just a look at the actual targets that were set by CEJA. Again, these are called Site Energy Index targets. It's not exactly an EUI, it's a little bit different, but it's a metric that's used by the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory to evaluate the energy codes that are created at the national level. And so that's why it's put in there. And PNNL, the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, is actually doing modeling of the proposed stretch codes for Illinois to make sure that they meet these targets. And so essentially, though, you can see here, there's a skip because the legislation took longer. Anyway, I don't need to tell you all the details, but you'll see the first skip is actually 2 years instead of a 3-year cycle. And then after that, it will go to 3 years. And this is to try to kind of offset it with the state code update as well. And you'll see that they get to be more and more efficient over time. So this is residential targets, and then this is the commercial targets. So again, it's not there's no requirements for renewables or to achieve net zero energy, but with these conservation efficiency targets, that should get to net zero energy ready. And so looking at what Naperville had set in their sustainability work plan of adopting a building code that would get to net zero by 2030, this stretch code will be one way of getting pretty close to that target. And then just briefly wanted to talk how the residential and commercial stretch codes actually work. So as I mentioned, we do have a lot more detailed information on this. I just felt like we shouldn't probably give that today, but we have been having meetings with multiple municipalities, meeting with their actual city and village staff and going through the different measures and the code language. So if you think that anyone in Naperville is interested in that, or if you're interested in that level of detail, we can certainly go through that with you. But today, this is just going to be a high-level overview. So the residential stretch code essentially starts off and has mandatory measures that are required no matter what building path you choose for compliance. So the mandatory measures are new. They're not in the base energy code, and that includes some electric ready provisions. It includes EV readiness provisions, which you can also install an actual EV charger, and that meets the EV readiness provision. It has some solar readiness provisions and then some demand response provisions too. So that's thermostats and water heaters. And then after those mandatory measures are met, then it becomes up to the builder or designer to choose which compliance path they want to use. And so Isaac Elnacave from FIAS actually presented to you before. So he was probably explaining about how you can build something to the FIAS standard for this, and then it will meet the stretch code. So that's one of the compliance paths. So if you have somebody that's building a FIAS certified building, they just have to show that certification to the staff, and they have to have met those mandatory measures, and then they've met the requirements of the stretch code. One of the other options that's available is what we call the net zero appendix requirements. And it's basically a new pathway that would achieve net zero, and it's written in code language. So it's actually much higher in terms of efficiency than what the CEJA targets are, but if there's somebody that wants to figure out, how do I build this to be net zero, the requirements are listed there. So this is all optional in the sense that you get to choose which option. So those two requirements are there. It's called appendix requirements because that appendix was actually created and is part of the suite of I codes. It's part of the IECC. And then we have what we already have in Illinois, which is we have a prescriptive pathways compliance pathway. We have a performance pathway, which is like the total UA performance. And then we have the ERI compliance pathway that stands for Energy Rating Index, which is a more generic way of saying a HERS score. So a home energy rating score that has a HERS index. And so that's where you have an energy rater go out and they assign a score to the home using this specific methodology. So there's lots of choices for builders and developers to figure out how best to cost effectively meet this residential stretch code. So I think that that's really important to understand. So that's the basic stretch code. And then on top of it, there is optional adoption by municipality. There's an electrification appendix. And so it doesn't automatically come with a stretch code. It has to be additionally adopted and added with language that says that you can adopt it, you want to adopt it. And the reason to have an appendix like this is just to have consistent language across jurisdictions for those that are interested in electrification. The one thing that I will mention about this is that the stretch code as it's under development right now includes all of these measures, but the Capital Development Board, when they heard this a couple of weeks ago, they had the most concerns about the electrification appendix. So we don't know if that's going to stay in the final version, but I just wanted to let you know about it right now because it still technically does exist. And even if it gets taken out of the stretch code, that language does exist somewhere if a municipality is interested in electrification. So I think that's it on residential. I'll just pause for a second. Does anyone, this is the level of detail that I have in a presentation for the actual requirements. Does anyone have any questions about residential before I get into commercial? Okay.
Are there,
Oh, go
real
ahead.
quick, are there any emissions or I guess emissions factors or emissions by square footage that is associated with this code? Because we are trying to quantify that for grants, and we want cities to implement this so we can show emissions factors decreases.
Oh, that's interesting. So Jeanette, I don't know. I also know you're not 100% here. But so one of the things we have been working on is figuring out the total energy savings potential for municipalities that adopt this code. And we have been working with municipalities to figure that out for them. And then we can convert that into emissions. But the code itself doesn't have an emissions factor tied to it right now, as far as I know.
Yeah, just to underscore, that is absolutely correct. We can calculate that. But right now the code is not set up that way.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, it helps if we are able to get some quantification, especially going forward. If we receive this grant, we'll probably need it to quantify and report back to the federal government.
Yeah, I can understand that. Okay, great. Great question. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll just move on to the next one. So very similar in the sense that commercial also has a set of mandatory measures that have to be met before the path is chosen. The mandatory measures also include some electrification readiness, some solar readiness, some EV readiness, and again, this language is all available. So if you're interested in what it is, we're happy to get that to you. So once those mandatory measures are met, then there is the option of which compliance path the developer or the builder wants to choose. Again, PHIUS, which is the Passive House Institute of US, or Passive House Institute, which is just the European version, which again, Isaac hopefully explained everything to you last time, but, and I feel bad because if you weren't here last time, you don't know what it is. It's basically a very, very super efficient, tight building, and they have their own specific requirements, and it's got a certification attached to it. And so it goes through this rigorous certification process to ensure that it meets the actual targets of the Passive House standard. So you can choose that, and then it can meet this stretch code. There's also the same thing with the residential, where there's an optional, one of the options is to meet these requirements that were outlined in this different appendix to get to net zero. Again, that's above and beyond the targets of CEJA, but it can be helpful if you have people that are looking to try to do that and really want to meet the net zero requirements. And then we have for the commercial side, sorry, my Zoom toggle is right over my there we go, right over my screen. So sometimes I can't see what's happening. So the commercial requirements are actually based on the 2024 IECC, which is upcoming. And so there's the 2024 IECC requirements, and then the 2024 has an optional path of using ASHRAE 90.1 2022. And ASHRAE 90.1 2022 was actually not quite as efficient as what the proposed 2024 IECC is. And so they had to put in additional efficiency measures if you take the ASHRAE path to make it meet the CEJA requirements. So essentially there's 4 paths that you can choose on the commercial side. The nice thing about the 2024 and the 90.1 2022 is that that's going to be the next version of the commercial code that the state is looking to adopt. And that's the idea with the stretch code, is that you want to be introducing things that are going to be upcoming. So you're basically preparing the marketplace to be ready for the next step of what's coming. And the same thing with the residential. There are aspects of the upcoming 2024 IECC that are put into the residential stretch code. So that I think is one thing that we can talk about with the developers, is the sense that it's not, how do I say it? It's basically preparing them for what the Illinois code might look like and is very likely to look like going forward. And so in that way, it's like Naperville either does it now or they wait, 2 or 3 years and they're going to get it anyway. So the developers are going to have to deal with it at some point. And if you want to move Naperville forward, you should do it sooner. That being said, the CEJA targets will probably start getting stronger than ASHRAE and the IECC's going forward. But right now, it really is the next thing that's coming up. And then this also has the optional electrification appendix. So the same things that I said about the residential, again, it's optional here by municipality. And yeah. So that being said, we can talk about some next steps, but I thought first that we can talk about some of the things that we've been working on and what the timeline is for the stretch code. So the stretch code currently, the language for the stretch code has been finalized. It has gone through the Illinois Energy Code Advisory Council, who gave recommendations to the Capital Development Board. The Capital Development Board just heard it a couple of weeks ago, and they voted it down because of some appeals that are happening at the national level for the 2024 IECC. Those appeals are going to be wrapping up in a couple of weeks. And so the Capital Development Board is going to be voting again on the language in March. That being said, they have a statutory requirement to have this completed and available for adoption by July 1st of 2024. So this is really the time that we've been working with municipalities to give them this information and help them make these decisions. Some of the things that we've worked on with other municipalities is we've talked about stakeholder engagement. We've given presentations to staff, policymakers, and the public based on what a specific municipality wants. We can do educational type meetings, as I mentioned before. We can tailor them to the specific stakeholders, and sometimes it's more technical and sometimes it's not. We also have put together materials for municipalities or people that are from municipalities and not necessarily city staff or part of a municipality, to help them engage, like including things like, how does a city council process kind of work? I mean, like, how do you give them the information, and who do you have, and how do you get a policy champion? And we have information like that. We also, as I mentioned, can provide more technical information. So we mentioned like the savings estimates. We can do that specifically for a municipality if you were to adopt a stretch code. We've helped with some building stock analysis. We've been putting together stretch code 101s that are similar to this, but we also have put a lot more technical language together for city staff. And we have a meeting that we're running quarterly called a BEEP, which is the Advanced Building Energy Efficiency Policy group through the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, where we can connect you with other municipalities that are talking about stretch codes. Just as an example, at that meeting, the last time we had someone from the state of Massachusetts who has had the nation's oldest stretch code talk about how they've been successful with stretch codes there. And for whatever it's worth, the developers were really concerned about stretch codes there too, and it didn't end up hurting anything. But so I know that those stories can be really helpful, and that we're trying to connect municipalities with others just to hear directly from them. And then we also can provide templates and language, specifically ordinance language to help to adopt a stretch code. We can help people understand how the rulemaking process works, and we can help do presentations and fact sheets or provide templates for that if municipalities are interested. So this is the level of technical assistance that we can provide to Naperville. I just want to say that for other municipalities that can take advantage of ComEd's programs, we are also looking at how existing utility programs and maybe new programs and incentives can come in to help with stretch code implementation. We would be happy to talk to the Naperville utilities to talk to them about what we're looking at here. I did look through your climate action plan a little bit and saw that there were a lot of things regarding the utility and new programs that they wanted to do there. And I felt like this might be a good overlap with that. I don't know how the utility actually works, but just offering to give information to them in case you all think that would be helpful, especially one of the biggest hurdles and barriers that we hear is that, for example, developers and builders might be concerned about the increased cost that a stretch code has with it. And so maybe there are things that a utility can provide in terms of incentives. It's always nice if it comes from like the local utility. But then at the same time, we've also been working with municipalities to help them understand the federal grant opportunities that are available or the state grant opportunities that are available that could be potentially used for this. So we can still do that federal part, state part for Naperville as that information becomes available. But yeah, so Jeanette, do you have anything else you want to add before we kind of open this up? I just want to make sure we're getting at everything everybody wants.
No, I don't have anything specifically to add. I do want to say that I have to jump off to get my kids to bed. But I would just reiterate that what Allison's last points that there are options for ways that we can continue helping you. So would love to explore that.
Thanks, Jeanette.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Jeanette, and have a fun time putting the kids to bed. So I see in the chat that Chris asked if any municipality is committed to adopting the stretch codes yet. So not 100% officially. As you can imagine, everybody wants to see what the final language is going to be, and I completely understand that. We do have two that are really interested and that want to do it once it comes out, but we can't have any kind of commitment until they've seen that language. And then other municipalities are very interested, but they also just want to wait and see how things go. So they're waiting for other municipalities to do it. And they also are interested to see if there's going to be training and incentives available. I will say, in case you haven't heard this already, the state is looking to provide some trainings around stretch codes. And then also, we're looking at developing a utility program to actually help provide trainings as well. One of the other things that we're looking at for a potential utility program would be to provide staff support on the you know, like plan review, maybe helping education for inspectors. We're looking to be able to create some potential stretch code checklists and like all different kinds of things at the staff level to help. Part of that may be through utility program. Part of it may actually just end up being like Mia and Slipstream doing it. So all of that to say, there's a lot of technical assistance coming to Illinois about the stretch code at many different levels. We're trying to kind of I don't want to say quantify it, but just assemble it so that municipalities have an idea, because I feel like a lot of the concerns that you all expressed, and it's not different in other municipalities, they all have the same concerns, will be able to be handled by this level of technical assistance that's going to become available. That being said, I know it needs to be packaged in a way that the staff understand it and that they feel comfortable with it. So, yeah, I'll just leave it at that, and would love to hear any thoughts or if you all have any questions for me.
I have a question about, so if the city, they're in the process of updating their building code, right? The stretch code, you're saying the language won't be out until it should be up for adoption come July.
Right. I mean, the
So,
language is available right now. It's just won't be finalized through the rulemaking process so that municipalities can adopt it by July 1st. And maybe it will be completed by then. It's kind of the same thing as like how the state energy code works, where it has to go through the Energy Code Advisory Council, then the Capital Development Board, then it goes to rulemaking and is open to public comment, then it goes to the JCAR, then, you know, and then finally it's like, now this is the enforcement date that it can go into effect. It has to go through the same process. And the language, though, is already completed, except for that there might be a couple of tweaks here and there. But that being said, CEJA requires those efficiency targets be met. So the efficiency measures are not going to be the things that change. The potential things that might change might be the non-efficiency measures, which would be like the electrification readiness, the electrification appendix, that kind of stuff. So
do you
all
think,
that being, oh, go ahead.
do you think, I saw something where there's some legislation coming up about, you know, a rule that municipalities cannot force electrification or something like that is,
Is for Illinois.
yeah.
Okay. I
It
mean,
was
I
it,
can't.
I don't know, there was something in that email today from the Capital Development Board about 3 different proposals for
Oh, yeah,
legislation. And
sure.
when one had to do with right, electrification.
Okay. I mean, all of those are bills and they're not law yet, so we don't really know what that's going to do. So unless they pass, then, but as of right now, that they're not anything to, I don't know. I mean, I can't even speak to, I haven't looked at the bills, so I can't speak to how likely they are to pass, but I'll just say, like, as of right now, they don't they're not law. So right now, there's nothing that says that you can't do that. But yes, I mean, if the law changes, then the law changes, and that's, that's a different conversation.
I have 2 questions. The first is there a possible like middle ground for municipalities? Like we're gonna have the base codes is gonna be for any typical thing, but then if a developer comes and wants some kind of concession, we're gonna tell them they need to follow the stretch codes, kind of like we have with affordable housing. Like if builders want, some some special thing, then we go back and say, well, you know, you got to put in some affordable housing. So is that something that could be done or would be a good strategy or?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I've thought about this a little bit in the sense of like, let's say, just as an example, Naperville has, really backlogged permits or something. I'm not saying it's true, but I'm just saying as an example because those things happen. And a developer is like, we really, really want to get in, and Naperville is like, well, we can't go any faster. And then you could be like, okay, well, we'll do expedited permitting for people that build to the stretch code. Then a developer might be like, yeah, I really want to get this in, and then that kind of puts them to the top of the list. Then it's not technically a requirement by Naperville. It doesn't become your stretch code, but it would be like an incentive instead. You're incentivizing with an expedited permitting process. But yes, you could do the same thing. Like if you could make it so that it's just for city run and owned and operated buildings. You could make that be a requirement to kind of ease it in, and it's just city facilities. Or you could, like anything that's using city or state funds or something like that. Okay. Naperville does not do expedited permitting on any projects.
Well,
But there are some kind of middle ground things like that you could potentially do.
Yeah. So, the other question is like, your last slide with all the things that you can do to sort of help us through this process. I always kind of like to take these kind of, presentations and get to, what's our to-do list? Like, what is our next step? And so, like, if we were able to get you, to meet with our transportation engineering and development department or something, would that be like the first logical next step?
Yeah, potentially. I would say we could come up with what, maybe this isn't today, just because it's late, but maybe we come up with what we think our plan would be. And so we actually have a flow chart that we made, that talks about like the different steps that you should be taking when you're considering these. And it includes like stakeholder education. At what points do you try to do that? When do you educate policymakers and city council? When do you educate city staff and that kind of stuff? It's probably too much to go through tonight because it'll be a lot of information, but maybe what we can do is we meet with this group again and we can talk through like what that it's kind of like a engagement plan would look like. And then we could figure out, is the next step actually what you were saying, Kathy? Because maybe it is. But maybe it's talk to that council woman, Allison, or something, and maybe bringing her in now is the best thing to do because she can tell us like, oh, this messaging is the only thing that works, and we need to, engage these people first, and this person on city staff is really good or something. Yeah, Chris, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I was just wondering, have you talked with IMEA, or sorry, not IMEA, Illinois Municipal League, IML, or any of the mayors, like DuPage Mayors and Managers Caucus or anything like that, those kinds of groups where you could potentially do some mass education all at once and get everyone on the same page?
I mean, I will say we have talked with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, but not the other ones that you mentioned. So I appreciate that. It's a great idea. Aaron, I see you have your hand up. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm running the meeting. You guys probably want to run your own meeting. Apologies for that.
My question is how has been, and maybe this has been addressed in different meetings, but how does this mesh with the city improving its own electric grid to support all the electrification that is going on? I mean, is there any help for the city in that, or have studies been done to show what the current grid can support in different areas of the city, depending on the age of the grid? I'm just curious if anything has been done.
So I don't know the answer to that question in the sense of, what the Naperville electrical utility has done, but I'm sure that they do those kinds of assessments. The thing I would say though is that the connection between the efficiency of the stretch code and the grid is significant, because if we're going to be electrifying buildings, we need to be making the buildings use less energy so that they don't put more stress on the grid. And so and I was just going to say, Kathy, to your point of like, is there a middle something? Like maybe the first step is talking to the Naperville utility and asking them to create a program that incentivizes the stretch code. If you build to the stretch code, you do this. And it could be part of, we're doing the efficiency to support the electric grid for electrification or something. I don't know. I am really sorry, but I'm really not familiar with the Naperville utility. But that could potentially be something. Anyway, yeah.
Naperville's use of electricity has been dropping steadily over the
Nice.
years.
Mhm.
Can you, and the electric utility director, of course, is concerned about that.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. I know there was a reference to your to-do list. Could you put that slide back up just so I can
Uh-huh.
focus on it again?
Yeah, you don't need to be looking at us. This is much more helpful information. There
Okay.
you go.
There is. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to review it again. But anyway, that may be an unusual situation, right? That is not true in other cities.
Mhm.
But that is the fact in Naperville. And we do have a pretty big deployment of electric vehicles. But the electric vehicles are, generally charging at night.
Mhm.
And more, we are projecting that more will be added, but per capita, we actually have the most electric vehicle, density in the state of Illinois is in Naperville. So the total number of electric cars, of course, are much, much bigger in Chicago. But if you look at it in terms of population versus number of electric vehicles, we're a leader. In fact, the
That's
mayor talked about that at one of our community meetings as a pride point. What we're a lagger in, though, is that we don't have charging stations. We have charging stations in the city, and they're broken, which has been a thorn in the side of Nest for a long time now.
my
So
gosh. I'm
yeah,
sorry to hear that.
yeah. The various grocery stores and things, like when I just went by Amazon Fresh, there were like 4 Teslas charging there. Myers has charging stations. So some of the businesses have stepped up and put in charging stations, I'm sure, to, attract customers, because that's a ideal time, for somebody to plug in, right? I'm running into the store to shop, for 45 minutes or half an hour, whatever it is. I might as well, pick up some electrons.
Mhm.
So just addressing this electric utility incentives. So Naperville has Naperville residents and businesses have access to the Naperville Renewable Energy Program, which is funded through voluntary contributions by ratepayers, and it is underfunded. But then commercial entities have access to IMEA incentives. And so, we have advocated for better funding of the local incentive program and not found a lot of success with that. So, I think while we definitely would want some incentives, I think that might be a little bit of an uphill battle. But
Sure.
I do think that, Yeah, I think our electric utility director, understands that electrification is coming, and is trying to prepare for that. So I think our local grid is pretty well managed as far as we can tell.
Um, I should have made a caveat with everything that I'm saying, and that I will just brainstorm ideas. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they're all good and that you
No,
should take them.
I think they are good ideas, but it's whether we can make it happen. But that being said, like I feel like everything that we do, there are barriers to moving forward, and we need to continue to find ways around those barriers. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
It-
just because I say it might be an uphill battle doesn't mean it might not be worth trying.
Sure. And you all obviously know Naperville way better than me. So thank you for giving me, the feedback on when I say something about like an idea, because definitely not just trying to push an idea. We want to figure out something that works for you all. So even though I did mention like going through the stakeholder engagement type of plan, if you all don't want to do that and you just want to bring in and like just go to that next group that you already said, we can certainly do that as a next step too. So we're open to working with you however you want our assistance. So just let me know what you want, and we can have another meeting to try to figure out some of these things. We can make it like a short meeting. I can put together an agenda. We can tick off some things because I know everybody's time is valuable. I can also set up that meeting with that group that you were talking about if you just want to, do the two things right off the bat. And if you guys want to talk about it amongst yourself, kind of regroup, reach out to us, we can also do that. So just let us know how we can be helpful.
Yeah, Allison, I think we'll definitely get back in touch to try to work on that stakeholder engagement, and maybe under the templates and language, your presentation or fact sheet templates. I think, yeah, that could be really helpful. I think in our committee, we did set up a work plan on how we were going to approach this, and we did want to meet with city staff. We planned on presenting to the city council. We wanted to have some information meetings for developers and contractors. Like we sort of have a lot of ideas about this, but we haven't gotten into the,
Yeah.
we haven't planned the specifics yet because we were still trying to do this kind of overview, get everybody up to snuff on the general idea of what's a stretch code, what's coming, when is it supposed to be coming. But it's definitely part of our next steps, is all of that.
Yeah.
So that's definitely for, future, another meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, I should have mentioned too that we have put together a series of fact sheets that get to some of the questions that we have, including does development hurt, do stretch codes hurt development? We're still working on that one. We have some ones that specifically talk about cost and cost effectiveness, because that's always a question. We're working on putting one together that kind of has like some ideas for how cities can leverage like the funding and that sort of thing for implementation. So not all of those are finalized yet. I'm trying to remember the ones that we do have. Most of the ones that we do have finished are on the benchmarking and BPS side. So, if you ever think Naperville is going to be interested in that, let me know. And actually, I have a very interesting project that we're working on that might make it a lot easier for city staff in Naperville to do something like that. That's being funded through the U.S. Department of Energy. So if you do ever want to talk about existing buildings, let me know. But yeah, so that being said, at our next meeting, or if you guys decide that you want to meet with us again, we will have we will have some fact sheets that hopefully will get at some of those things. So if you want to have those meetings with developers and you want to have the meetings that you were talking about, we'll be able to arm them with some things. It's not technically listed on this yet, but we would love your input on them too to see if you think they'll be effective. But we're currently putting some of those things together. The development one is a big one. That's one we hear from
Right.
everybody.
Right, yeah. Well, thank you. I think I want to try to wrap things up because we're, well, 10 minutes to 8:30, but we try to end kind of early. Did anybody else have any comments or questions before we try to close things up?
Real quick, I had created fact sheets on the different things that were supposed to be in the codes a while ago when it all first came out, and I shared them again in the chat. If anyone needs a copy, you can always feel free to email me too, but we were trying to basically, this is what we were trying to start a year ago, I think, or more, as soon as it came out, of educating and talking to city council and talking to staff. So I feel like we've been doing this for a long time. But we need to continue to get the word out, and I will share, Illinois Municipal League, IML, is having has an annual conference, and they have a call out for papers right now and presentations. So I'll share that with you, Allison. That may be a great place to reach the most municipal decision makers, at one
I
place.
love it.
Yeah, I think that would be really great. And I know people who have attended that before, and usually they really enjoy going, and it's usually pretty good. So they come back with a lot of information. So
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I put my email address in the chat. And then I know Jeanette also wanted me to share hers. Give me a quick second so I can pick it up. Okay.
Well, while Allison's doing that, I just want to let everybody know that the Building and Development Committee meets every fourth Wednesday of the month, generally speaking. So if anybody who's been here tonight is interested in this topic and in other topics related to building and development, please feel free to join or to reach out to me and the committee. And we're always looking for new members and happy to have people who are interested to participate. And there. So thanks, Allison. That was a really informative presentation, and I think we all learned a lot. And we'll definitely be in touch. I think we'll probably set up another meeting to try to continue the conversation and see how we can help Naperville move this topic along.
Great. I am curious. I mean, I don't want to get into it, but if some other day, would love to hear if this was similar to what Isaac presented or not, just because I don't know what other people are presenting on. But you don't have to do that today. Hopefully at some other time in the future. And I put Jeanette's information down there. And thank you guys for having me. Seriously, so much. And Chris, also, just so you know, I live in Aurora. I've been told many times to reach out to you. I am just so busy, but I really want to help Aurora too. Anyway, it's so nice to see you all. I used to live in Naperville, so I feel a kinship with all of you here. And yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, thank
Really.
you so much. This was really informative.
thanks,
Thank you.
Allison. We'll connect soon. I know I'm super busy right now too. So
Yeah. Okay.
all
Well,
right,
take care,
thanks.
everyone. Have a wonderful night. Thanks for having us again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.